Hello, thanks for watching. This is a short video comparing two of the latest versions of the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra. Actually, it's the latest version and the version immediately prior to it. My left hand is the latest version. This is the 41 millimeter variety. There's a smaller one, which I believe is 38. The movement used is different on the 38 versus the 41. This one has the 8900, whereas the 38 millimeter has the 8800, and there are a few differences. Namely, I believe this one uses 2 barrels as opposed to 1 on the 8800. Next to it is the version which preceded this one. This uses the 8500 movement, and as you can tell, they're obviously very similar. There was sort of an evolution of design going on from the prior version to the current one. Obviously, huge big differences are the date window placement. On the old one was at 3 o'clock. On the new one, it's at 6 o'clock. Other differences are that the old one is actually 41.5 millimeters, and the smaller version of it correspondingly is 38.5 millimeter case diameter. So old version is half a millimeter larger. The striping on the dial was vertical in the old one. It's horizontal on the new one. Other differences are the case shape itself. Even though they both have this twisted lug design, there is a slight difference. As you can see, the 8900, the new version, the lugs are shorter than in the old version. Also, you can see some slight difference in the side of the watch. I apologize, neither of these is new, but you can get the idea. The bracelet itself is similar, but again, you can clearly see a difference. It's the new version is actually flatter than the old version, and it's flatter. It's sort of it's not as sculpted, I guess would be the word. So here, each link has more of a curvature. There's more depth. Even the spacing is a little bit bigger between links versus the new one. There's almost no space. They're very flat. Maybe you can see better this way. See the old one. The clasps are different as well. I mean, both are butterfly clasps, but I'll show you the new one. The button for the clasp is on the actual last link, I guess you call it, and you see how nice and flat it is underneath. The new one, the old one, excuse me, that was the new one. The old one closes in a similar way. Let me do it the same orientation so you can compare, except the buttons are here, not on the link. They're here. So close, and then as a result, you see this is not as flat. There's a little difference in the engraving on the clasp as well. As you can see, this is just a symbol. This is says the Omega on it. Crowns are similar in that they have the logo, but the shape of the crown is slightly different. Maybe this way you can. Now, if these were the same color, it would be an ideal comparison, but they're not. This one is obviously black. This is the famous blue, similar to the one that was featured in the Bond movies. So, I'm not going to go into the specs, but just give you my general impressions. The new one is the more comfortable watch between the two, and I've worn both of these extensively. The bottom of the clasp makes a big difference. Makes a big difference in the comfort. The bracelet itself, the thinness, I think also adds to the comfort, and the shorter lugs also make it fit my wrist better. At least my wrist is a little around 7 inches, maybe slightly less. But so for a smaller wrist, that definitely does help. And I think, again, this might be different depending on your preference or wrist size, but 41 millimeters, the half millimeter smaller diameter is a plus for me as well. Now, the interesting thing is, despite the comfort of the new one, I actually think the old one is the better looking watch. And I'm sure there's many people who disagree. You know, they enjoy the symmetry of the 6 o'clock date window as opposed to this the frameless 3 o'clock date window here. But I'll tell you, the reason why I think this is the better looking watch is the longer lugs give it a much more sculpted appearance to the whole case. You know, that twisted lug, there's more space for that twisted shape to really you know, be apparent. The bracelet itself actually is also nicer. I mean, nicer looking on the old one, I think. I think the thickness matches the watch better. This is not a very thin watch, either of them. And the bracelet on the old, the 8500 version, was more proportionate. And I think the spacing and the curvature of each link also just makes it a better looking bracelet. Unfortunately, the clasp, as I said, is slightly less comfortable because the buttons ended up here on the old version. I also think, even though it's a minor detail, the engraving on the old version is nicer. It's classier. It doesn't need to say Omega here. You know, I mean, I think the symbol is sufficient. You can take a better look. The dial is the one area where I would say I really can't pick a winner. I think they're very close. I do think there's more symmetry with the 6 o'clock day window. I also like that there's like less writing here on the dial, on the new one. But the vertical lines are really nice too. That's a very difficult call. I think I would really say that's very, very down to just personal preference. You know, some may like the 3 o'clock date window. I'd say it's probably a little more traditional to this watch, as the prior versions of the Aqua Terra also shared that. This is definitely a little more slick, you know, comfortable due to the smallness and the, you know, shorter lugs, and as I said, the thinner, flatter bracelet. But I think this is as more of a looker. This is the better looking piece. Very, you know, difficult to say one is much better than the other, as they're very similar. Case backs, the case backs are obviously very similar. The movements are you know, are not that different from one another. The 8500 has a, you know, more traditional case back in that, you know, regular tools can be used to open that case back versus the newer version with this scalloped edging. You know, I personally am not really a fan of something like that. You know, it's more proprietary. I like everything to be accessible with regular tools as much as possible. So I actually prefer that on the older one. You know, those are my thoughts on it. I would say older one, the better looking one, slightly, and newer one, the more comfortable one. And I would say that's more than a slight difference. The newer one is significantly more comfortable. I would say probably if you're looking to get one of these pre-owned or new, I don't know how many of these the old version are still floating out there new, but pre-owned, there's plenty of both, and it would probably come down to price. You can get definitely a better deal on the older one, and, you know, depending on how much of a better deal, that's probably where you're gonna get the most bang per buck. But if comfort is very important to you, stick with the newer one. It is significantly more comfortable, even though the changes are